The call came at 2:47 a.m., pulling Marcus Chen from a dreamless sleep in his cabin on the western edge of the Ho rainforest. The voice on the other end belonged to Sarah Whitmore, the regional wildlife biologist whose territory overlapped with his acoustic monitoring sites. "Marcus, I need you to come to Grid 17. Now! Don't tell anyone. Just come." He dressed in the dark, his breath misting in the unheated room. October had given way to November with unusual cold, and the first frost had silvered the moss-draped hemlocks outside his window. As a conservation geneticist contracted by the National Park Service, Marcus was accustomed to odd hours and urgent fieldwork, but Sarah's tone carried something beyond professional urgency, something like fear or awe, or both braided together. Grid 17 lay 8 miles northeast, accessible only by logging road, and then a steep trail through old-growth Sitka spruce. Marcus loaded his field kit: sample tubes, sterilized swabs, portable cooler, headlamp, emergency beacon. The protocols were automatic after 6 years of tracking wolverines, fishers, and the occasional disputed cougar sighting. He drove through darkness so complete it seemed to absorb his headlights, the road a tunnel through ancient forest. Sarah was waiting at the trailhead with 2 others, Tom Brecker, a veterinary trauma specialist from Port Angeles, and Kiona Redhawk, a tribal liaison from the Quinault Nation whose knowledge of the backcountry exceeded any map. Their faces, illuminated by the cab light of Sarah's truck, looked pale and tight. "Whatever you think you know," Sarah said, "leave it here." They hiked in silence, single file, their headlamps carving narrow corridors through the understory. The forest smelled of decay and mushrooms, that rich late-autumn scent of things breaking down into soil. After 40 minutes, they descended into a ravine where a seasonal creek cut through basalt formations, and there, sheltered under an overhang on a makeshift tarp, lay something impossible. At first, Marcus's brain categorized it as bear. The size suggested Ursus arctos, maybe 350 kilograms. But the limbs were wrong, the proportions were wrong. And then Tom shifted his position, and the LED lantern he'd set up caught the face. Not a bear, not human, something else entirely. The creature, male, Marcus's taxonomic instinct supplied, was unconscious, breathing shallow and labored. Blood matted the rust-colored hair on his left shoulder, and a makeshift splint of alder branches had been lashed to his right forearm. Someone had tried to help him. Marcus's gaze snapped to Kiona, who met his eyes without flinching. "I heard him fall," she said quietly. 3 days ago, rock slide above Miller Creek. By the time I got there, he'd dragged himself here. I've been bringing water. He won't touch food." Marcus knelt slowly, his hands suddenly clumsy. The field kit felt absurd now, a child's toy in the face of this breathing impossibility. He forced himself into clinical observation. Bipedal, plantigrade feet with elongated metatarsals and a robust hallux adapted for gripping. Hands, not paws, with opposable thumbs and fingernails, not claws. The facial structure blended archaic hominid robusticity with something wholly distinct. A pronounced supraorbital torus, a broad nasal aperture, a prognathic jaw that nonetheless housed teeth decidedly not carnivorous. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "We need to stabilize him," Tom said. He'd already laid out his supplies with surgical precision: IV fluids, antibiotics, wound dressing. "That shoulder's infected. If we don't act now, sepsis will kill him in 24 hours. Sarah crouched beside Marcus. "We can't take him out the moment we involve a hospital, or Park Service higher-ups, or anyone with a phone and an agenda." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Marcus understood the calculus of discovery. Specimen, not person. Property, not kin. A biological treasure that would be dissected by institutions with no concept of stewardship. "We treat him here," Marcus said. "Everything off the books. No samples leave this site without—" He stopped himself, uncertain what protocol could possibly apply. Without whose consent? The being before him was unconscious, critically injured, and entirely unknown to science. Informed consent was a bitter joke. "I'll need help holding him if he wakes during the IV," Tom said. "Kiona, you're the strongest. Marcus, Sarah, get ready to assist." The next 3 hours were a controlled crisis. Tom irrigated the shoulder wound, a deep laceration consistent with impact against sharp rock, while Marcus monitored vital signs that defied every reference range he knew. Heart rate, 62 beats per minute, slow for the mass. Respiration, 8 breaths per minute, deep and efficient. Body temperature, 36.1, slightly hypothermic but stable. The creature's blood, when Tom reluctantly drew a sample for typing, was unmistakably red, mammalian, and, Marcus noted with a chill, compatible with O-negative human blood for transfusion purposes, should it come to that. Halfway through the antibiotic infusion, the creature's eyes opened. They were amber, flecked with green, and profoundly aware. Marcus froze. The gaze swept across each of them, cataloguing, assessing, and then settled on Kiona. A sound emerged from the creature's chest, low, modulated, not quite a vocalization but not mere breath either. Kiona responded in kind, a soft hum that seemed to ease the tension in the air. The creature's eyes closed again, but his right hand, the uninjured one, moved fractionally toward her, palm up. "He knows you," Marcus said. Kiona nodded. "My grandfather told stories. My great-grandmother saw them twice. They're not myths, they're neighbors. We just don't talk about it." "Why not?" Sarah asked. "Because talking is what humans do before they destroy things." They finished the treatment in silence. By dawn, the creature's breathing had steadied, and the angry red flush around the shoulder wound had begun to fade. Tom left antibiotics and detailed instructions, making Kiona promise to check the site twice daily. Sarah documented nothing in writing, but committed every detail to memory, her scientific training warring with her instinct for protection. Marcus lingered after the others began their hike back. The forest around them was waking, a varied thrush calling its descending trill, the rustle of a Douglas squirrel in the canopy. The creature slept on, his massive chest rising and falling with a rhythm that seemed ancient, unhurried, aligned with some deeper clock than the frantic ticking of human urgency. Before leaving, Marcus placed his hand briefly on the tarp near the creature's shoulder, not touching but acknowledging. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for whatever comes next. I'm sorry we're here at all." The creature's eyes opened again, just a slit, and for a moment Marcus felt the weight of an intelligence that had watched humans from the shadows for millennia, watched them clear-cut forests, dam rivers, pave over migration routes, and chosen, again and again, invisibility over contact. Then the eyes closed, and Marcus climbed back into the cold morning light, carrying a secret that felt like an anchor, and a trust he had no idea how to honor. Over the next week, Marcus returned to Grid 17 daily, each time alone or with Kiona. The creature, Marcus privately named him Aiden, an old Gaelic word meaning fire, for the way his eyes had burned with awareness, grew stronger. The infection receded. The splint on his forearm proved unnecessary. The break had been minor, already knitting with alarming speed. By day 5, Aiden was sitting upright. By day 7, he was standing, albeit with a pronounced limp, favoring his injured side. Communication began with necessity. Fiona brought water in a collapsible silicone container, and Aiden touched his forehead, then his throat, then gestured toward the creek. Water. Marcus sketched simple pictograms in his field notebook. A sun for day, a moon for night, a stick figure for human, a larger, broader figure for... What? Your people? Aiden studied the drawings with an intensity that suggested literacy of some form, though whether symbolic or pictographic Marcus couldn't determine. On day 9, Aiden drew a response. With one thick finger, he etched shapes into the soft mud near the overhang. A series of crescents, a zigzag line, 3 vertical marks. Kiona studied them, then gasped softly. "The crescents are the moon," she said. "The zigzag, that's the river. The marks are 3 people. He's telling us how many survived something, or how many are left." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "A population estimate. He's giving us a count. 3. Out of, what? Dozens, hundreds." The implications were staggering. If Eden's people numbered in single digits in this region, they were functionally extinct, a ghost lineage clinging to the edge of oblivion. Every conservation instinct Marcus possessed screamed for intervention: captive breeding, habitat protection, publicizing their plight. But publicizing meant exposure, and exposure meant the end of everything that made them what they were. "He's telling us they're dying," Sarah said when Marcus relayed the interaction. She joined them on day 10, bringing field rations and a portable spectrometer to analyze scat samples found near Aiden's temporary shelter. Confirmation that his diet consisted of roots, tubers, berries, fungi, and occasional small game, protein supplemented but not dependent on large kills. And he's asking us to understand without saving them, or maybe he's saying we can't save them. "Why not?" Marcus demanded, frustration sharpening his voice. "If we know they exist, if we can document their needs, establish protected corridors." "Protected by whom?" Kiona interrupted. "The same park service that opens backcountry to drone surveys? The same government that logs tribal lands for timber revenue? The moment this becomes official, it becomes managed. And management means control. Control means collars, monitoring, human decision-making about where they can go, what they can eat, who they can be. Isn't that better than extinction?" Aiden, who had been resting against the basalt wall, made a sound, a sharp exhalation through his nose, a negation. He reached for Marcus's notebook, flipped to a blank page, and drew with deliberate care a large circle, then a smaller circle inside it, then a human stick figure outside both. He tapped the large circle, then himself, tapped the small circle, then Marcus, tapped the stick figure outside, then made a slashing gesture across the page. Boundaries, territory, and a warning. "Stay out." "He's not asking for help," Marcus said slowly. "He's negotiating a treaty." "Or he's telling us the treaty was already broken," Sarah said, "by us being here at all." That night, back in his cabin, Marcus extracted the single blood sample he'd discreetly collected during Aiden's treatment. A violation of every principle he'd just defended, but he had to know. He ran a preliminary PCR analysis on the portable thermocycler he kept for field genetics, targeting mitochondrial DNA sequences common to all primates. The results arrived at 3:18 a.m., and Marcus sat staring at his laptop screen until dawn. The mitochondrial haplogroup was basal to all known human lineages, older than Homo sapiens, older than Neanderthals, older than Denisovans. But the nuclear DNA, when he ran a rough admixture analysis against reference genomes, showed something impossible: evidence of introgression from anatomically modern humans within the last 2,000 years. Chromosomal fusion patterns matched human chromosome 2. Regulatory regions bore signatures of recent balancing selection for cold adaptation, efficient oxygen transport, and, chillingly, something in the FOXP2 locus and surrounding region, genes implicated in vocal and cognitive development. They weren't just hominids, they were sister lineage, a branch that had split perhaps 1 million years ago and then occasionally intertwined with humanity's own story. The genetic data suggested a population bottleneck roughly 500 years ago, coinciding with European contact and its attendant diseases, followed by centuries of decline. 3 individuals, 3 left in this forest. Marcus closed his laptop and walked outside. The stars were fading, and the first thrushes were singing. Somewhere in the forest, Aiden was watching the same dawn, carrying the weight of his people's twilight. For the first time in his career, Marcus understood that some discoveries were not meant to be documented. Some knowledge was a burden, not a triumph. He made a decision then, standing in the cold November morning. He would be a witness, not a scientist, a guardian, not a discoverer, and he would see this through to whatever end Aidan would allow. By the third week, Aidan had abandoned the overhang. Keona found his tracks leading northeast, deeper into the roadless wilderness where even Forest Service maps turned speculative. Marcus and Sarah followed at a respectful distance, marking the trail with GPS waypoints they would later scrub from official records. The tracks were deliberate, almost pedagogical, clear prints in mud, broken branches at eye level, scat left conspicuously on flat rocks. Aidan was teaching them to see the forest as he did, a landscape of signs and negations, territory and taboo. 3 days into the tracking, they found the first pictograph. It was carved into the smooth bark of a paper birch at the edge of a muskeg wetland. 3 vertical lines, evenly spaced, with a horizontal line beneath them. Above, a crude representation of mountains. Below, a flowing line. River. Keona photographed it with her phone, then immediately deleted the image, committing it to memory instead. "He's mapping," she said, "showing us their range." The range, as it emerged over the following weeks, through more pictographs and carefully arranged stone cairns, was smaller than Marcus had feared, and larger than seemed survivable. Roughly 40 square miles of contiguous wilderness, bounded by the Ho River to the south, the Bogachiel to the north, and the steep eastern slopes of the Bailey Range, where no trails penetrated. Within this territory, Aidan's people had persisted for generations, perhaps centuries, by maintaining absolute discipline. No fires, no permanent structures, no accumulation of waste, and above all, no patterns that could be photographed or documented by the drones and satellites that now surveilled even the deepest backcountry. "It's not enough land," Sarah said one evening as they reviewed topographic maps in Marcus's cabin. 40 square miles for 3 individuals may be sustainable, but there's no genetic diversity. One bad winter, one disease outbreak. "They know that," Keona said quietly. She'd been silent for most of the planning session, her dark eyes reflecting the wood stove's glow. "My great-grandmother's story included a detail I didn't mention before. She said they used to come to the river in autumn to trade, furs, dried meat, medicinal plants, with the Quinault and Ho peoples. The trading stopped in the 1930s. She thought it was because we'd become too dangerous, too many cameras, too many roads, too much government. So they chose isolation over contact," Marcus said, "even knowing it meant decline. Wouldn't you?" Keona's gaze was steady, accusatory. "If contact meant your children taken for study, your dead dissected, your sacred places turned into viewpoints for tourists?" Marcus had no answer. The history of indigenous peoples in North America provided all the evidence necessary. Contact with dominant cultures meant erasure, whether fast or slow, violent or bureaucratic. On a cold morning in early December, Aidan made contact on his own terms. Marcus was checking an acoustic monitoring station near Crystal Creek when he heard the sound, a low, modulated whistle that seemed to come from the forest itself. He'd learned to recognize it, Aidan's call for attention, a frequency just below human vocal range, but within our hearing. Marcus whistled back, a simple ascending note. Aidan emerged from behind a massive western red cedar, moving with a silence that defied his size. He carried something bundled in cedar bark, a section of bark perhaps 2 feet square, covered in charcoal drawings. "A gift," Marcus breathed. Aidan placed the bark carefully on a flat boulder, then stepped back. He gestured, "Look, but don't touch." Marcus approached slowly, pulling out his headlamp for better light. The drawings were sophisticated, almost cartographic. At the center, a cluster of symbols, stick figures with elongated bodies, marked with the 3 vertical lines Marcus now associated with Aidan's people. Around them, concentric circles, the first circle unmarked, the second dotted with trees, the third crosshatched, the fourth filled with small human figures and angular shapes representing structures. "A territory map," Marcus said. "The inner circle is their core area. The second is the buffer zone, where they tolerate passage. The third, that cross-hatching, that's the boundary. And the fourth is human space, Fiona said. She'd arrived silently, as she often did, her presence a comfort. He's proposing a formal boundary, the third circle. Humans don't cross it. His people stay inside. How do we enforce that? Sarah asked, joining them with Tom, who'd become a regular visitor, his veterinary expertise evolving into something like diplomatic medicine. It's national park. Hikers go wherever they want. Aidan made a low sound, not hostile but firm. He drew in the mud at his feet, a circle with a slash through it. Then he pointed to the map, to the cross-hatched boundary line, and repeated the gesture. He's saying it's already enforced, Tom said slowly. From their side, they stay out of our space. He wants us to do the same. But we already violated that, Marcus said, guilt twisting in his chest. I've been in their core area. We all have. Aidan turned to him, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other. Then Aidan touched his own injured shoulder, then Marcus's chest, a gesture that seemed to say necessity, or forgiveness, or perhaps now you know better. He's offering a reset, Fiona said. A pact. We helped when he needed it. Now we learn the rules and respect them. Over the next 6 weeks, the pact took shape through slow, patient negotiation. Aidan returned weekly to the boulder by Crystal Creek, each time bringing new drawings or modifying existing ones. The boundary line became precise, marked by natural features, cliff bands, dense thickets, a series of wetlands too treacherous for casual hiking. Within that boundary, Aidan's people would remain invisible. Outside it, Marcus and his small team could continue their work, but with new protocols. No drones within 2 miles of the boundary, no night vision surveys, no eDNA sampling from streams that originated within the territory, no sharing of GPS data with Park Service higher-ups, and above all, no documentation that could lead others to the site. It's deception, Sarah said bluntly one night. We're lying to our employers, falsifying reports. We're practicing selective omission, Marcus countered. We report what's relevant to our jobs. We protect what's vulnerable. And when someone else stumbles across them, when a hiker with a good camera gets lucky, then we deal with it, Fiona said. But until then, we keep the trust. The question of Aidan's people, the other 2 individuals, haunted Marcus. He saw evidence of them only obliquely, tracks too small to be Aidan's, possibly a female, scat samples with different dietary markers. Once, from a distant ridge, he glimpsed 2 figures moving through a subalpine meadow, but they were gone before he could focus his binoculars. In mid-January, during the worst cold snap in a decade, Aidan broke protocol. He came to Marcus's cabin. Marcus woke to the sound of something large moving on his porch. He grabbed his headlamp and a canister of bear spray, heart hammering, and opened the door. Aidan stood in the snow, his breath misting silver in the moonlight. Behind him, 2 others, a female, smaller but powerfully built, and a juvenile, perhaps adolescent, with curious eyes and less of the wariness that defined the adults. Jesus, Marcus whispered. Aidan made a low sound, urgency, and gestured toward the juvenile. The young one was favoring his left leg, limping badly. Frostbite, Marcus realized with horror. The foot was swollen, discolored even through the thick hair. Okay, Marcus said, forcing calm into his voice. Okay, come inside, please. They didn't. Aidan made a sharp negative sound. The juvenile stayed on the porch while the adults retreated to the tree line, watching. Marcus understood. They would allow treatment, but not intrusion. He worked quickly, bringing out his field kit, a portable heater, warm water. Tom arrived 20 minutes later. Marcus had sent a terse text, "Emergency, come now." And together they irrigated the frostbitten tissue, applied antibiotic ointment, and wrapped the foot in sterile gauze. The juvenile endured it with remarkable stoicism, making no sound, though his eyes tracked every movement. When they finished, Aidan approached, touched Marcus's shoulder, the first physical contact between them, and then led his family back into the forest. As they disappeared, the female paused and looked back. She touched her chest, then pointed to Marcus, then made a sweeping gesture that encompassed the forest, the cabin, the invisible boundary line. "She's saying we're part of this now," Fiona said. She'd arrived with Tom, bringing extra supplies. "We're inside the pact." Marcus nodded, unable to speak. The weight of that trust was almost unbearable. Over the following weeks, he refined his understanding of Aiden's people through careful observation and the exchange of pictographs. They were matrilineal, with the female, whom Marcus privately named Kale, a name Fiona suggested meaning keeper, serving as primary decision-maker. The juvenile, whom they called Rin, was likely their only surviving offspring. Genetic analysis from shed hair Marcus found near the creek confirmed devastating homozygosity. The effective population had collapsed to a level where every mating carried high risk of lethal recessive traits. "They're in a genetic death spiral," he told Sarah. "Even if we could protect habitat perfectly, even if we could eliminate all human pressure, they don't have the diversity to survive long-term." "How long?" 2 generations, maybe 3 if they're lucky. "Then what's the point?" Sarah's voice was raw. "Why are we protecting them if they're doomed anyway?" "Because they're asking us to," Marcus said simply. "Because they'd rather die as themselves than live as specimens." In late February, Aiden brought the final piece of the pact. It was a carving, laboriously etched into a cedar plank, a human hand and a larger hand, palm to palm, with a vertical line between them. Below it, a single word, or what looked like a word, composed of glyphs Marcus had never seen before. Fiona studied it for a long time, her fingers tracing the shapes without touching. "It's not Kino," she said finally. "Not Ho, not Quilut. It's theirs, their own script. Can you read it?" "No, but I think it means what the image shows. Separate but equal. Neighboring. Respect. It's a treaty," Tom said quietly. "The first treaty between humans and—" He stopped, searching for the right word. "Our cousins," Fiona finished. "That's what they are. Not animals, not aliens. Family we forgot." Marcus carefully photographed the carving with his phone, one of the few pieces of evidence he allowed himself to keep, and then erased the image, rephotographing only the section without the glyphs. In his field notes, he recorded the location as Grid 19, a different watershed entirely. The real site would remain unmarked, unvisited, except by those who had earned the knowledge. That evening, as Marcus sat by his wood stove writing the last of his falsified reports, documenting wolverine activity that didn't exist, omitting the fisher dens he'd found that overlapped with Aiden's core area, he felt the full moral weight of what they'd done. They had participated in a cover-up. They had betrayed their institutions. They had chosen loyalty to a dying people over transparency to their own, and Marcus knew, with absolute certainty, that he would do it again. The pact was sealed not with signatures, but with understanding, a boundary drawn not on maps, but in conscience, enforced not by law, but by love for a world still wild enough to hold mysteries it would never surrender. The violation came in April, with the Thor, a backcountry skier, some adrenaline junkie documenting his exploits for a YouTube channel, posted a video that went viral within hours. The footage, shot from a helmet-mounted camera, showed a blurry figure moving through subalpine timber near the Bagachiel headwaters. The figure was large, bipedal, and moved with unsettling fluidity through terrain that should have been impassable. The comments section exploded. Bigfoot enthusiasts, skeptics, armchair analysts enhancing every frame. By the time Marcus saw the video, it had been viewed 1.4 million times. "It's Rin," Fiona said, her face ashen. They were gathered in Marcus's cabin, the 4 conspirators who'd kept the secret for 5 months. "Look at the gate. He's still favoring that left leg. Can we get it taken down?" Sarah asked. "On what grounds?" Tom's voice was bitter. "It's public land. The guy has every right to post his footage." Marcus watched the video again, his stomach churning. In the final seconds, before Rin vanished into the trees, the young one paused and looked directly at the camera. The expression on that face, neither human nor animal, but something startlingly aware, would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. He didn't know what the camera was, Marcus said softly. He thought it was just another human. He looked because he was curious. And now, the whole world is curious, Kiona said. Park Service will send teams, researchers, media. It won't matter that we've kept them secret. Someone will find them. The prediction proved accurate with terrible speed. Within a week, the Olympic National Forest was swarming with cryptozoology enthusiasts, documentary filmmakers, and 3 separate scientific teams demanding access to the area. The Park Service, under public pressure, authorized expanded aerial surveys. Drones hummed over the canopy. Trail cameras proliferated like fungus. Marcus worked frantically behind the scenes, using his position to redirect searches away from the core territory. He filed bogus reports identifying the viral sighting as a likely hoax, a person in costume, and proposed alternative search grids miles to the south. Sarah did the same, flooding her supervisors with data suggesting the figure was a misidentified bear. Tom used his veterinary contacts to spread rumors of a habituated black bear with unusual movement patterns. But the pressure was relentless, and then, on a misty morning in late April, Marcus found the first signs of flight. The pictograph site at Crystal Creek had been abandoned. The cedar bark treaties, carefully maintained for months, had been removed. All that remained was a single new drawing, hastily carved into stone, 3 vertical lines moving upward and east, with an X slashed over the territory map. "We're leaving." "No," Marcus whispered. "No, you can't." "Where will you go?" But he knew the answer. Nowhere was safe. Not anymore. The viral video had turned Aiden's people from legend into quarry, and the hunt would not stop until someone, some scientist or documentarian or trophy seeker, got the photograph, the specimen, the proof. Fiona found him at the site an hour later. She said nothing, just sat beside him on the boulder where Aiden had first offered the pact. "I killed them," Marcus said finally, "by treating Rin, by letting them trust us. I brought attention here. You extended their lives by 5 months, Kiona replied. Rin would have died from that frostbite. Maybe all of them would have died in that cold snap. You gave them time. Time to watch their world shrink. Time to lose even the illusion of safety. Time to make a choice on their own terms, Kiona said firmly. That's not nothing. That's everything. Over the next month, Marcus searched for signs of Aiden's family with increasing desperation. He found nothing. The core territory was empty, the trails cold, the pictograph sites blank. It was as if they had evaporated, dissolved back into the forest's green mystery. In late May, the scientific teams gave up. The media moved on. The YouTube video became a curiosity, endlessly debated, but never resolved. The Park Service quietly scaled back its surveys, though a few trail cameras remained, digital sentinels watching empty forest. Marcus filed his final reports in June and resigned his position. He told his supervisors he was pursuing other opportunities, but the truth was simpler. He couldn't bear to be complicit in the machinery that had destroyed the very thing he'd sworn to protect. He stayed on the Olympic Peninsula, taking a job with the Quinault Nation's forestry program. Kiona was his supervisor. Together, they worked to establish conservation easements that would, over time, create corridors of protected land extending east into the Cascade foothills. It was slow work, bureaucratic and frustrating, but it was something. On a September evening, 18 months after Aiden first opened his eyes in that ravine, Marcus returned to Grid 17. The overhang where they'd treated him was still there, unchanged, except for the passage of seasons. Moss had reclaimed the ground. A Douglas fir seedling had sprouted in a crack in the basalt. Marcus sat for a long time, listening to the creak and the wind. He thought about the last pictograph, the X slashed over the map. He thought about Rin's curious face staring into that camera. He thought about treaties made and broken, about borders drawn and violated, about the hubris of a species that believed discovery was always a virtue. As dusk fell, he heard the sound. A low whistle, modulated, just below human range. Marcus's heart stopped. He stood slowly, scanning the darkening forest. Aidan stepped into view, alone. They regarded each other across 20 feet of forest floor. Aidan looked older, leaner, but his eyes still burned with that profound awareness. He made no move to approach. Instead, he reached into a pouch at his waist. Marcus had never seen them carry anything before, and removed a small object. He placed it on a stone, then stepped back. Marcus approached carefully. The object was a carving, no larger than his palm, 2 hands, palm to palm, with no line between them. Below it, carved with painstaking precision, were 2 glyphs from their written language, alongside a crude rendering of a human infinity symbol. Together, always, remember. When Marcus looked up, Aidan was gone. He searched for hours, calling softly, but found nothing. The forest kept its silence, as it always had, as it always would. Marcus never saw Aidan or his family again. Over the following years he searched, discreetly, carefully, always alone, but found only absence. The core territory remained empty. The pictograph sites were reclaimed by weather and growth. If Aidan's people still survived, they had perfected the art of invisibility to a degree beyond even their previous mastery. In his more optimistic moments, Marcus believed they had migrated east into the vast roadless areas of the North Cascades, where wilderness still stretched unbroken and the human footprint remained light. In darker hours, he feared they had succumbed to their genetic collapse, the last 3 individuals dying in some hidden place where their bones would crumble into soil and leave no trace. But he kept the carving, that small cedar sculpture of unity. He kept the falsified records, the scrubbed GPS data, the careful omissions that preserved the last shreds of their privacy. And he kept the pact. Kiona kept it too, and Sarah and Tom. They never spoke of it outside their small circle, but the knowledge bound them in ways that transcended friendship. They had been witnesses to something immense and fragile, a lineage that had persisted for 1,000,000 years, only to falter at last beneath the weight of human expansion. The boundary they had agreed upon, that cross-hatched 3rd circle on Aidan's map, remained in Marcus's mind as both promise and accusation. It was the boundary humans had crossed 10,000 times over, the line between respect and domination, between coexistence and conquest, between wondering and knowing. Marcus never crossed it again. He established formal protocols within the Quinault forestry program. Certain areas were designated sacred and off-limits, not for legal reasons, but for ethical ones. When pressed for justification, he spoke vaguely of cultural sensitivity and traditional ecological knowledge. Those who needed to know understood. Those who didn't assumed it was just more bureaucratic caution. On the 5th anniversary of that first meeting in the ravine, Marcus returned to Grid 17 one final time. He brought no recording equipment, no samples, no tools. He simply sat by the creek and remembered. As evening fell, he carved his own message into the soft bark of a red alder, a human version of the pictographs Aidan had left. A small figure kneeling, hands pressed together, facing toward 3 vertical lines in the distance. Gratitude, apology, promise. The forest offered no response. But in the deepening twilight, Marcus heard the thrushes singing their twilight chorus, and the creek murmuring its ancient language, and the wind moving through branches that had stood long before humans learned to light fires. And he understood, finally, what Aidan had been trying to teach him from the very beginning, that some boundaries are not walls, but invitations, not barriers, but sacred spaces where the mystery lives on because we chose not to violate it. The silence Marcus kept was not the silence of ignorance. It was the silence of reverence, the only offering worthy of a people who had chosen dignity over survival, invisibility over exposure, and who had trusted just once that a human might understand the difference. He would carry that silence until his death. And if the weight of it was sometimes unbearable, it was also, in its way, a grace. Because some things are not meant to be discovered, some cousins are not meant to be named, and some boundaries, once agreed upon, must be honored even, especially when no one is watching. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it with others who care about the mysteries that still live in the wild places. Subscribe to our channel for more speculative fiction grounded in science, ethics, and wonder. The stories we tell shape the world we protect.